The bullet wasn't meant for the dog. It was meant for Officer Jack Turner. But when the shot rang out in the blizzard above Silver Ridge, his canine partner Shadow leaped into its path, and the world stopped. What began as a routine rescue of a missing girl spiraled into a deadly conspiracy buried deep within Jack's own department. By dawn, nothing in Silver Ridge would ever be the same. Loyalty would be tested, betrayal exposed, and a child's secret would turn the hunter into the hunted. Stay till the end, because this true act of courage will break your heart and restore your faith all at once. Like, subscribe, and don't miss what really happened the night a hero took the bullet meant for his best friend. Snow fell steadily over Silver Ridge, the kind of snow that muffled engines and silenced whole streets. Officer Jack Turner steered his patrol car through the empty downtown headlights, cutting 2 narrow cones of gold into the white. In the back seat, Shadow, his canine partner, sat alert and steady, his breath clouding the divider glass. Dispatch had called 10 minutes earlier, possible missing child 10 years old, last seen near Maple Creek Park. Jack knew the name of the family. The stepfather worked odd jobs around town. The mother kept quiet at the grocery store. Domestic calls in small towns were always tangled. He parked near the park's frozen gate, switched off the siren, and listened. The storm whispered against the metal roof like soft sand. Somewhere beyond, the dark water murmured beneath the ice. He radioed in Unit 12 on scene. Static cracked, then a faint, "Copy that." He opened the rear door. "You ready?" Shadow dropped to the ground, tail low, nose lifted to the wind. Jack followed the paw prints leading toward the line of trees. "Emma," he called softly. His voice vanished into the snow. The park was a blur of white benches and black limbs, a winter negative of the place kids played in summer. His flashlight swept across the swing set, empty, half-buried. Then Shadow stopped, head-tilted, nostrils flaring. The dog moved toward a low stand of furs and barked once, controlled, purposeful. Jack's pulse quickened. He crouched and lifted a branch. A small figure huddled beneath it, a red parka dusted with snow, a wool hat pulled low. The girl's eyes blinked up at him, wide and wary. "Emma," he said, lowering his tone. "I'm Officer Turner. You're safe now." She didn't move. "This is Shadow. He's friendly." The shepherd waited motionless, his breath white in the beam. After a long moment, the girl nodded faintly. Jack reached in, careful and slow, and helped her to her feet. She was trembling but not frozen, the kind of cold that came from fear as much as weather. He wrapped his spare blanket around her shoulders and led her toward the cruiser. "You're okay," he said quietly. "We'll get you warm." Inside the car, the heater hummed. Emma sat still, hands tucked under the blanket, watching Shadow through the divider. Jack poured lukewarm cocoa from his thermos lid and handed it to her. "Try a sip." She obeyed, small hands steady. "Did you get lost?" She shook her head. "Were you hiding?" A pause. Then she nodded. Jack kept his tone gentle. "From who?" She bit her lip and looked down. The silence stretched. Outside, snow tapped the windshield in soft, urgent rhythms. Shadow shifted behind her seat, leaning closer. The dog's nose brushed the edge of her sleeve, then froze. Jack saw the change instantly. The ears, sharp, the stillness taut. Shadow wasn't reading the child. He was reading the scent clinging to her coat. Jack spoke quietly. "Emma, did you see someone today? Maybe someone carrying something?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "He had a gun." Jack felt the air leave him. "Who did?" She didn't answer. He turned slightly in his seat, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. They were brown, wide, and older than 10. "You're safe with me," he said again, softer this time. "I promise." She nodded, but her shoulders stayed tense the way a child braces before thunder. He keyed the mic. Dispatch Unit 12. I have the juvenile. She's unharmed. Transporting to temporary shelter. Static, then. A weak 10-4. He started the engine, but a feeling settled in the kind that pressed behind the ribs. The missing child wasn't missing. She was running. As they drove, the town's lights dimmed behind falling sheets of white. Emma, he said, will stop by a friend of mine, Dr. Hayes. She runs the vet clinic near the ridge. It's warm there. The girl nodded without looking up. Okay. She reached out a gloved hand toward the metal great fingers resting close to Shadow's muzzle. The dog stayed still, eyes soft. For the first time, Emma's shoulders eased. Jack caught it in the mirror, the faintest sign of trust. He took the next turn slowly. How long were you out there? Since afternoon. Why didn't you go home? Her voice was small. Because he'd be there. Jack didn't push further. The heater clicked and hummed. The car smelled faintly of leather coffee and snowmelt. Outside, the storm was thickening the road, narrowing to a tunnel of white. You'll be safe now, he said again, though he felt the words tightening. The stepfather's call, the girl's silence, the dog's alert, it all drew a shape he couldn't yet name. A gust shook the cruiser. The headlights flickered. Jack adjusted his grip on the wheel. Almost there. Ahead, faint through the snow, the vet clinic's porch light glowed amber. He parked near the entrance, left the engine idling. Let's get you inside. He helped Emma out the blanket wrapped snug around her. Shadow circled them, scanning the dark. For a moment the storm hushed, and Jack thought he heard something, a distant engine down the hill slowing idling. He turned, but the snow erased everything beyond 20 feet. He guided Emma toward the door. Dr. Lauren Hayes appeared scrub-top under a flannel, her hair tied back. Jack. In this weather, he nodded toward the girl. Found her near the park. She hurt, no. Just cold. And scared. Lauren crouched to Emma's level, voice warm. Come in, sweetheart. Let's get you a blanket. Emma hesitated. Eyes flicking to the window, then stepped inside. Jack followed, wiping his boots. Shadow lingered by the threshold, nose to the wind, ears tilted. Jack watched him a moment before closing the door. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and pine soap. The warmth hit like relief. Lauren led Emma to the couch and brought a steaming mug of tea. You'll feel better in a minute. Jack removed his gloves and rubbed his temples. There's something off, he murmured. Shadow picked up a scent gun oil. Lauren's brow furrowed. From her clothes, he nodded. She says someone with a gun was nearby. Stepdad made the report. Lauren glanced at the girl who was now petting Shadow's head gently, the dog perfectly still. You think she's running from him? I don't know yet, Jack said. But I don't like coincidences in a blizzard. Outside, the wind pressed hard against the glass. The light above the porch flickered once, then steadied. Jack looked toward the window, the reflection of the three of them framed in the glass, a cop, a vet, and a child whose silence carried more truth than words. Somewhere out there, the night was not finished. It was only pausing to breathe. The storm had grown heavier by the time Jack and Emma left the clinic. Snow whirled in dense spirals across the windshield, the wipers fighting a losing rhythm. Dr. Lauren had insisted they stay until morning, but Jack wanted to get the girl to the county shelter where social services could keep her safe. The drive would take less than 20 minutes in good weather, but tonight every mile stretched thin with risk. Shadow lay in the back seat, his head resting between the cage bars, eyes fixed on Emma. The girl sat bundled under a blanket, small hands gripping the cup of cocoa Lauren had given her for the road. Jack kept his voice low, steady, more to fill the silence than to comfort himself. Almost there, Emma. Once we get to the shelter, they'll have warm beds and clean clothes. She nodded faintly. Will Shadow stay? He smiled slightly. He goes where I go. You'll see him again tomorrow. The road climbed through the pines, a narrow ribbon of black vanishing beneath waves of white. Jack slowed as visibility dropped, tires crunching against the frozen shoulder. Every sound felt louder in the storm, the hum of the heater, the hiss of wind pressing against glass, the creak of the steering column when he turned. His thoughts circled the same quiet question. Who had she been hiding from, and how close were they now? As the cruiser rounded a bend near the ridge, Shadow lifted his head, suddenly ears stiff. The dog's growl came low and brief, a warning drawn from instinct older than reason. Jack's hand went automatically to the radio. Dispatch Unit 12 approaching Ridgeway, visibility poor but clear. Only static answered the signal, smothered by the storm. He tried again, adjusting the dial, but the hiss deepened a hollow sound like wind moving through wire. "Something wrong?" Emma asked softly. "Just the storm messing with the radio," Jack replied, though his eyes kept moving between the mirrors. The forest pressed close on both sides, trees bending under snow. The beam of his headlights caught nothing but white, until a sudden flicker appeared ahead, a glint of metal where there should have been only snowdrifts. Before he could react, a black pickup skidded sideways out of a hidden logging road blocking the path. Tires shrieked. Jack slammed the brakes, the cruiser sliding sideways, snow exploding around them in clouds. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, faces covered, rifles raised. The world narrowed to motion and light. Jack shouted down as he leaned across the seat. The first shot shattered the windshield glass, scattering like ice rain across the dash. The second tore through the mirror, and the radio crackled to life for a single heartbeat before dying completely. Emma screamed and ducked beneath the blanket. Shadow lunged forward, barking a thunderous sound that filled the small cabin. Jack drew his sidearm and kicked the door open, using it as a shield. Bullets struck metal, sending sharp metallic echoes through the storm. He returned fire twice, aiming low, forcing the attackers behind their truck. Snow turned red where the bullets struck. "Stay down, Emma!" he yelled. The girl pressed herself against the seat, trembling but silent. One of the masked men advanced along the driver's side, moving through the storm's veil. Jack saw the silhouette lift a rifle, the muzzle flash blooming orange. There was no time to aim. He heard Shadow's bark split the night, one fierce, desperate sound, and then the heavy thud of impact. The shepherd had leapt from the back seat through the shattered window body, twisting midair. The shot meant for Jack never reached him. It struck Shadow square in the chest. The dog hit the ground hard, rolling once, then lay still against the snow. For a second, the world went utterly still. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The sound of the storm fell away. He rose from behind the door, fury and disbelief colliding inside him. He fired twice more, forcing the gunmen to retreat behind their truck. One stumbled, clutching his arm. Jack seized the moment, grabbed Emma by the coat, and pulled her from the passenger side. "Run to the trees," he ordered. The girl hesitated, eyes wide at the sight of Shadow lying motionless. "Go!" he shouted again, pushing her toward the dark. She ran, small boots sinking into snowdrifts. Jack crouched beside his dog, hands trembling as he pressed against the wound. Blood, dark and warm, spread beneath his gloves. "Stay with me, boy," he whispered. Shadow's eyes flickered open, the light in them dim but steady. Jack felt the faint rhythm of breath, weak, but there. The gunmen shouted to one another, their voices blurred by the storm. Jack knew they'd regroup. He tore off his scarf and pressed it to the wound, his mind racing through every decision he'd ever made that had led to this night. "You saved her," he said, voice breaking. "Now it's my turn." He lifted the wounded dog into his arms, muscles burning from the weight and the cold. He could barely feel his fingers, only the pulse of urgency that drowned out pain. Emma stood by the tree line, tears freezing on her cheeks. Jack motioned for her to move. Together they stumbled toward the cruiser. He lowered Shadow into the back seat, wrapping the blanket tight around the dog's chest. The monitors blinked once, still faintly alive. He climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and prayed the engine would answer. The starter coughed twice, then caught. Headlights cut through the white. He slammed the gear into reverse, spinning the cruiser around as bullets sparked off the trunk. Snow roared under the tires. The attacker's truck tried to follow, skidding sideways on the ice. Jack floored the accelerator, the siren wailing a thin cry into the storm. The blizzard swallowed everything behind them. Emma knelt in the back, holding Shadow's head, whispering something only the dog could hear. Jack's chest tightened, but he kept his eyes on the winding road ahead. "Hold on, partner," he murmured. "You don't quit on me now." The storm answered with a howl that drowned the world. Somewhere behind them, the sound of engines faded until there was only the rhythmic beat of the wipers and the ragged breathing of a child and a dying dog. Ahead, faint through the falling snow, the glow of town lights shimmered like a promise he refused to break. The cruiser tore through the snow-choked highway like a wounded animal trying to find shelter before the storm swallowed it whole. Jack Turner gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles went white beneath the gloves. The heater blew weak, uneven air. Frost crept back across the inside of the windshield faster than he could wipe it away. Shadow lay on the back seat wrapped in a blanket, his chest rising in slow, uneven motions, each breath sounding like it came from somewhere deep and fragile. Emma knelt beside him, whispering softly, one hand resting over the dog's paw. The light from the dashboard flickered across her pale face. "He's breathing," she said in a trembling voice, as if speaking it might make it stay true. Jack nodded, eyes on the road. "Keep him warm, sweetheart. We're not far." The wipers squealed across the glass, barely keeping pace with the storm. Outside, the blizzard had grown thick enough that even the headlights looked strangled dim circles in a wall of white. The radio hissed softly beside him. "Dispatch Unit 12, he said, trying again for the fourth time. "I need emergency veterinary and medical units ready at Silver Ridge Clinic. Officer down, K9 hit." Static answered long and hollow. He switched frequencies, tried the sheriff's channel, then state patrol. "All dead. Come on," he muttered, tapping the mic. Nothing. The storm had devoured every signal. They were alone on the mountain. He exhaled through his teeth, forcing calm back into his voice. "We'll make it," he said more to himself than anyone. Emma looked up from the back seat. "Can't you call someone?" "The storm killed the lines," Jack replied quietly. "We'll have to do this ourselves." She nodded slowly, tears freezing along her lashes. For a few miles, the only sound was the hum of the tires over snow and the faint, steady beep of the K9 monitor that Jack had clipped to Shadow's harness before they left the station. Each pulse of sound was a heartbeat he couldn't afford to lose. Then, without warning, the beep went silent. Jack's own heart clenched. He grabbed the monitor and tapped the side. No response. "Stay with me, boy," he whispered. "Stay with me." He glanced into the mirror and saw Emma pressing both hands to Shadow's chest, her small fingers trembling. "He's warm," she said quickly. "He's still warm." Jack nodded, forcing himself to keep driving. He knew that stopping now meant freezing in place, buried alive by the storm. The snowbanks on either side of the road had grown into walls high and solid. The mountain's curves twisted blindly, every turn a leap of faith. He eased his foot on the accelerator headlights, glancing off the pale wooden signs half buried in white. That was when he saw them: tracks. Fresh tire tracks cutting through the storm ahead of him, sharp and clear. Not plow lines, not patrol. Too deep, too wide. Pickup tires. He stared at them for a second, then looked to the side mirror. Nothing but white and darkness. His mind turned over the thoughts slowly, like glass grinding in a gear. "They knew this route," he murmured. What Emma asked. "The men who attacked us," Jack said, his voice tightening. "They were waiting on the ridge. They couldn't have guessed we'd take that road unless someone told them." The weight of realization pressed against his ribs. The ambush wasn't random. It was planned precise. He thought of the stepfather's call, the rushed tone, the insistence that Emma was missing near Maple Creek. He had followed the call's coordinates without questioning the timing. "They wanted me there," he said under his breath. "They wanted her there." His grip on the wheel tightened. "You were never lost, were you, Emma? You were being hunted." The girl's eyes widened, confusion and fear colliding. "I don't understand," she said. "Why would they?" Her voice broke. "I don't know." Jack set his jaw tight, "but I'll find out. Right now, we just have to get him help." A gust of wind slammed against the car, pushing it sideways. Jack fought the steering, the tires slipping, then catching again. His shoulders burned from tension. "It's okay," he said, keeping his tone steady. "We're all right." The storm howled louder, snow flying in spirals so thick it felt like driving inside a cloud. He leaned forward, peering through the windshield. The faint glow of the ridge lights should have been visible by now, but there was nothing, only white stretching endlessly ahead. He checked the dashboard compass. The needle spun aimlessly, disoriented by the storm. He was flying blind. "Lauren's clinic is down the old service road," he muttered, thinking aloud. "We'll take the shortcut by the timberline. It's rough, but it'll save time." He turned the wheel carefully and felt the tires bite into the packed snow of the unplowed path. The cruiser jolted with every rut, the suspension groaning. Emma held on to the seatbelt, watching Shadow's chest rise faintly. "You'll be okay," she whispered to the dog. "You have to be." Jack kept one eye on the road, the other on the rearview mirror. The faint gleam of headlights flickered far behind them for a heartbeat, then disappeared. He blinked, unsure if it had been real or just reflection. "They're following us," he thought, though he said nothing aloud. His training told him that fear fed mistakes and mistakes killed. He forced his mind into order. Distance to the clinic less than 5 miles, storm speed rising, threat range unknown, Shadow's breathing fading. Duty pulled him one way, turn back report, call for backup once he hit a signal. Loyalty pulled him another, save his partner, the one who had taken a bullet to protect a child he barely knew. He looked at Emma, her face lit by the dim dashboard light, hands still pressed to Shadow's fur. Duty or life, law or love. The two roads ran parallel in his head and both vanished in snow. "We're not stopping," he said quietly. "We're finishing this." His voice carried no anger, only resolve worn thin by years of loss. The storm swallowed the car whole as he pushed forward, every second a battle against time and fate. Behind them, in the whirling white, the faint beam of a truck's headlights reappeared for a moment closer, now slower, patient. Jack didn't see it, but Shadow did. The dog's ear twitched, once his chest rising weakly as if he sensed the danger returning. Ahead, a faint amber light finally blinked through the storm, the sign for Silver Ridge Veterinary Clinic. Relief flooded Jack's chest, but it came with the bitter edge of fear. If the attackers had planned one ambush, they could plan another. And now they knew he was still alive. The storm finally began to thin as Jack Turner's cruiser skidded into the gravel lot of Silver Ridge Veterinary Clinic. The building stood small and lonely against the wall of snow, its porch light flickering through the haze like a promise that refused to die. He slammed the brakes, jumped out, and ran to the back seat. Shadow's breathing had weakened to shallow tremors, blood soaking through the layers of towel and blanket. "Stay with me, boy," Jack whispered, lifting the dog into his arms. The heat of the wound seeped through his jacket, fading too quickly. Emma followed close behind, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Inside the clinic was quiet except for the hum of an old heater and the faint ring of wind chimes trembling near the door. Dr. Sarah Cole, a young veterinarian with calm gray eyes and auburn hair tied loosely under a cap, appeared from the back room the moment she heard the door burst open. "Jack!" she exclaimed, startled. "What happened?" "Gunshot," he said quickly. "Left chest. He's losing blood fast. Bring him in." She led them into the treatment room, clearing the metal table with one motion. "Lay him down. Harper warm blanket's oxygen tank now. Her assistant hurried to obey. Sarah's voice was brisk, controlled, the kind of calm that comes only when fear has no time to speak. She examined the wound, her gloved fingers moving fast, eyes narrowing at the entry point. The bullet didn't go through, she said almost to herself. We can save him if it hasn't hit the heart. Jack swallowed hard, watching every movement. Do whatever it takes. That's the plan. She injected a sedative into Shadow's vein, then glanced at the monitor. Heart rates faint but steady. The machine beeped weakly, a fragile rhythm that tethered hope to sound. Emma stood frozen by the wall, hands clasped, tears glimmering under the fluorescent light. Will he live? She asked in a whisper. Sarah didn't answer right away. We're going to give him a chance, she said finally. Jack moved to the counter, pulling off his gloves, blood streaking across his wrists. Do you need anything? Stay close, Sarah replied. If he goes into arrest, I'll need you to hold pressure. Minutes stretched into something weightless. The clock ticked. The storm thudded faintly on the roof, as if knocking to remind them it was still out there. Sarah located the bullet with a probe, her brow furrowed. It's deep, but the path is strange, angled upward like he jumped mid-shot. He did, Jack said quietly. He saved a child. Sarah nodded once, focused again. She removed the bullet and dropped it into a metal tray. The sound rang like a verdict. Blood welled from the wound, darker now, thicker. Something's not right, she murmured. His blood's clotting too fast. That's not normal for a wound like this. Jack frowned. What do you mean, there's a chemical reaction happening? The blood's binding in an unusual pattern, almost like it's been exposed to a compound. She glanced at the assistant. Prepare a toxin screen. Full panel. Harper hesitated. On a K9, yes. Now. As the machines hummed to life, Sarah flushed the wound with saline and injected an antidote base, hoping to neutralize whatever she couldn't yet name. He's reacting to something, she said quietly. Not just the bullet, Poison Jack asked. Maybe. Or something mixed into the metal. She met his eyes briefly. He's strong, but whatever this is, it's deliberate. The words hung between them. Deliberate. Someone had meant for Shadow to die slowly, even if the gunfire didn't finish the job. Sarah drew a vial of blood and slid it into the centrifuge. The hum filled the silence. We'll know in a few minutes. Jack walked to the window, looking out into the swirling night. His reflection stared back pale eyes, hollow uniform stained with red. They knew where I'd be, he said softly. They planned it. They wanted her there. And they wanted him dead. Sarah looked up, startled. The ambush. They knew our route before I called it in. That means someone fed them my movements. You think it's internal? Has to be. No one else had the schedule. The centrifuge beeped. Sarah pulled out the vial, studied the color change, then moved to the microscope. Her face shifted from confusion to disbelief. Jack, she said slowly, this isn't a standard toxin. It's a sedative compound, a very specific one. What kind? It's used in federal canine training programs, military-grade anesthesia. The formula's supposed to be restricted to official handlers. Jack's stomach dropped. You're saying someone used our own training chemicals against him? Yes, Sarah said. Someone who knows exactly what Shadow is and how his system works. She handed him the file from the test. Look here. The compound binds to adrenaline receptors. It weakens the heart without stopping it immediately. Whoever mixed this in knew how to make it look like simple shock. Jack stared at the numbers, each one proof that the shot had never been meant for him. It had been designed to destroy his partner. They knew his ID code, his dosage tolerance, Sarah added. That means it came from someone inside law enforcement or a contractor connected to it. Jack's jaw tightened. A mole. Sarah nodded grimly. I'll run the chemical signature through the national database when the storm clears. For now, we flush it out. She injected another stabilizer. He's got a chance, Jack. But you have to understand this wasn't an accident. Someone's targeting you both. Jack turned toward the window again. The storm had softened snow drifting like ash. He felt the weight of realization settle deep in his chest. Every rescue, every routine, call it all, could have been watched, calculated. They knew his blood better than I do, he murmured. That's not just betrayal, that's precision. Behind him, the monitor beeped faster, the rhythm strengthening. Sarah smiled faintly. He's fighting back. Emma exhaled a sound between a sob and a laugh, wiping her eyes. Jack moved closer, laying his hand on Shadow's head. You hang on, partner, he whispered. We're not done yet. The dog's ear twitched slightly at his voice. Outside, dawn's first light pressed weakly against the frost-streaked glass. The storm had passed, but the war it carried had only just begun. The wind howled against the small veterinary clinic like a restless animal, shaking the shutters and scattering snow against the windows. Inside, the air hung thick with exhaustion and antiseptic. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound that kept time from collapsing entirely. Shadow lay wrapped in clean bandages on the metal table, his breathing shallow but steadier than before. Dr. Sarah Cole sat at the counter reviewing test results, the dim light tracing sharp lines under her eyes. Across the room, Jack Turner stood near the window, his reflection faint in the glass phone in hand, though there was still no signal. The storm had silenced everything beyond these walls. Emma sat on a stool beside Shadow, a blanket over her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the rise and fall of the dog's chest. She hadn't spoken in a long while. Jack turned, studying her small, still figure. You should try to rest, he said softly. You've been awake all night. She shook her head. He might need me. Her voice was small but sure. Jack nodded, his chest tightening. He's lucky you're here. The generator hummed faintly in the back, the only barrier between them and darkness. Sarah rubbed her temples, scanning the charts. The toxin levels are dropping. He's fighting it, but the dosage was calculated precisely. Someone wanted him to die slowly, and they wanted it to look like shock failure. Jack leaned on the counter. Whoever did this knows police procedure, knows how we'd react. Sarah looked up. And they know you personally. The compound they used required access to restricted databases. The weight of her words pressed through the quiet like a second storm. Jack's gaze drifted to the floor, his mind replaying every recent mission, every name he trusted. Outside, a gust struck the glass hard enough to rattle the frame. Emma flinched. It's just the wind, Jack said. She nodded but didn't relax. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the blanket around Shadow. The motion dislodged a patch of gauze, revealing a small scar near his shoulder, an old injury from training days. Jack reached to fix it, his touch gentle, almost reverent. You've saved me more times than I can count, he whispered to the dog. You're not allowed to give up now. Sarah stepped away from the microscope, removing her gloves. Jack, you said the ambush happened near Ridgeway, right? Yeah, that's miles from any patrol route. How did they know you'd take that road? He hesitated. I didn't radio it in until we were already heading up the mountain. Then it wasn't the radio they used, she said slowly. Someone knew in advance. Jack frowned. But how? Before he could finish, Emma's voice broke in. I saw one of them, she said suddenly. Both adults turned toward her. She hesitated, her gaze flicking between them. When they shot at us, I looked up for a second. One of them had his sleeve rolled up. He had a tattoo. Can you describe it? Jack asked gently. Emma drew a small shape in the air with her finger. It was a black wolf with a scar across the eye. I've seen it before, where Sarah asked. The girl's voice trembled. On my stepdad's friend. He comes to our house sometimes. They go outside to talk where Mom can't hear. Jack's pulse quickened. Do you know his name? I don't know, but my stepdad calls him Vic. The name landed heavy in the room. Jack's expression hardened. Vic Doyle, he said quietly. Former tactical unit. He was discharged last year. He looked at Sarah. He worked for a private contractor, afterward security for classified transports. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Then he'd have access to restricted compounds and detailed information on K-9 units, Jack added. He could have gotten Shadow's medical records. The realization sank like ice water through his chest. He wasn't shooting at random. He was testing something. Sarah exhaled slowly. And he's connected to Emma's stepfather. The circle closed in silence. The storm pressed louder against the walls as if trying to listen. Jack walked to the door, locking it. We stay here until daylight, he said firmly. No calls, no movement. If they're tracking us... He stopped. Sarah turned from the counter, her expression suddenly alert. What? He pointed to the wall where the police vest hung over a chair. Shadow's vest. It's still on. Sarah frowned. We should remove it. It's soaked in blood. She picked it up carefully, turning it over. As she did, a faint red light blinked beneath the fabric, small and rhythmic. Her eyes widened. Jack, she whispered. There's something in here. He crossed the room in 2 steps. Where? She pointed to the inner lining. There's a device sewn into the seam. Not police issue. Jack grabbed a pair of scissors from the tray and sliced open the fabric. A small black tracker fell into his palm, no larger than a coin, its light pulsing steadily. They've been following us the whole time, he said, his voice low, controlled, but trembling underneath. Every turn, every stop. That's how they knew the route. Sarah stared at it, disbelief mixing with dread. That means they know you're here. Jack looked toward the window instinctively. Outside, the wind screamed over the empty road, carrying the faint echo of something mechanical beneath it. Maybe just the storm. Maybe not. He crushed the tracker under his boot, the light flickering out. It's dead now, he said. But they won't need it to guess where we went. This is the only clinic for miles. Sarah drew a slow breath. Then they're coming. Jack nodded, the weight of duty settling over his exhaustion. He checked his weapon, the last full magazine cold in his hand. If they come, they'll find out we're still standing. Behind him, Emma pressed her face against Shadow's neck, whispering through her tears. The heart monitor kept its fragile rhythm, a soft defiance against the storm. Dawn crept slow and pale over Silver Ridge, washing the world in a fragile stillness after the storm's rage. The snow had hardened into glassy crusts that cracked beneath each step. Jack Turner stood at the doorway of the clinic, his breath rising in the frigid air. The night had left behind silence, the kind that doesn't bring peace but warning. Inside, Shadow slept under the faint hum of a heater, his chest moving in steady rhythm. Emma lay curled on a cot beside him, one hand still resting near the dog's paw, as if afraid that letting go would break the spell keeping him alive. Dr. Sarah Cole stood near the counter, her tired eyes following Jack as he buckled his duty belt. "You're leaving already?" she asked quietly. "Only for a few hours," he said. "The storm's cleared. I need to see the ambush site before the snow buries what's left. Jack, whoever did this knows you're alive. If they find out you're out there alone, then they'll think I'm predictable." "That's an advantage I can use." Sarah frowned but didn't stop him. She glanced toward the window where weak sunlight spilled through frost. "At least wait until she wakes." Jack's gaze drifted to the girl. "She's safe here. If anything happens, you take her and Shadow through the back road to town." Sarah nodded reluctantly. "I'll keep them alive. You just make sure you come back." Jack gave a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes, and stepped out into the cold. The sky was a pale gray blue, the world muted by the weight of snow. His patrol car started reluctantly engine coughing before settling into a low hum. He followed the mountain road back toward Ridgeway tires crunching through the ice. The radio remained silent on the seat beside him, its cracked speaker no longer even pretending to reach the outside world. As he neared the curve where the ambush had taken place, the air grew heavier. The snow still bore scars, dark streaks where tires had dug deep fragments of shattered glass, glinting like frozen embers. Jack parked and stepped out, the wind slicing across his face. He moved slowly, scanning the ground with a detective's patience. His boot struck something half buried in the drift. He knelt and brushed away the snow. A shell casing gleamed faintly in the weak light. He picked it up and turned it between his fingers. The markings were clear SCPD 40 cal. His heart stilled. Standard police issue. Every officer in Silver Creek carried the same rounds, including him. He found another near the edge of the ditch, then a third lodged in a snowbank. The pattern was clear. Whoever fired those rounds had access to department weapons, maybe even a badge. He slid the casings into a small evidence pouch, his breath shallow. The betrayal no longer felt abstract. It was metal and cold in his palm. He straightened, scanning the tree line. The snow lay untouched now, except for his own tracks. Somewhere beneath it, tire ruts curved toward the highway. They led east toward the old industrial yard, a place long abandoned, except by those who wanted to be forgotten. He started back toward the car when his phone vibrated in his pocket, startling him with its sudden life. The screen flashed an ID he recognized instantly, Captain Roy Jensen. Jack hesitated, then answered. Turner. The captain's voice was low and steady, carrying the kind of authority that once brought comfort. Jack, I heard about the shooting. How's the K9? He's alive. Barely. And the girl's safe for now. There was a pause. Good work. You did what you had to. Jack frowned. Sir, the ambush wasn't random. I found police-issued rounds at the scene. Whoever did this, Jack. Jensen's tone sharpened. I need you to stop right there. Excuse me, I said drop the investigation. The state's sending their own team. They'll handle it from here. Jack's hand tightened around the phone. With respect, sir, these were our bullets. That means someone inside. Don't finish that sentence. The captain interrupted. You're tired. You've been through hell and you're not seeing straight. I'm ordering you to stand down. Someone tried to kill a child, and my partner Jack said quietly, I can't stand down. There was a long silence on the line. When Jensen spoke again, his voice had changed. Jack, listen to me carefully. Sometimes doing your job means knowing when not to dig deeper. You understand? No, sir. I don't. You should. For your sake. And the dog's. The line went dead. Jack stared at the phone, the last words echoing like a cold wind. He slipped it back into his pocket and looked toward the ridge. The sun had climbed higher, casting sharp light across the snow, but nothing felt warm. He understood the warning for what it was, not advice, but a leash. He climbed into the cruiser and sat for a long moment staring at the evidence pouch on the seat beside him. His own department stamp. His own ammunition. His captain telling him to let it go. A lifetime of faith in the badge weighed against the image of Shadow bleeding in the snow of Emma's small hands pressed to his fur, whispering prayers no child should have to learn. He turned the key, the engine rumbling awake. The choice had already been made, though he hadn't said it out loud. He would find the truth, even if it meant standing alone. As he steered the cruiser back toward town, the sun slipped behind a bank of clouds and the road ahead narrowed to a strip of white leading into the unknown. The afternoon light cut through the thinning clouds like dull blades glinting over the frozen pines that surrounded the outskirts of Silver Ridge. Jack Turner parked his cruiser half a mile from the old lumber mill, a place long abandoned since the logging company had folded a decade earlier. Its wooden towers leaned tiredly over the snow, and the wind that slipped through broken planks made a low, mournful whistle. He had followed the tire tracks from the ambush to this place, and every instinct told him it was not yet empty. He stepped out quietly, boots crunching on the icy ground, one hand resting on his weapon. The air smelled of old oil and sap. Somewhere deep inside the mill, a door creaked and a faint voice rose before the wind carried it away. Jack moved along the wall, checking the corners, eyes narrowing against the glare off the snow. Through a gap in the boards, he saw movement. 3 men, maybe 4, clustered around a portable heater. They spoke in short, low bursts. One of them wore a black parka torn at the sleeve, the same build as the man who had fired from the ridge. Jack could see the glint of a rifle resting on a crate beside him. They were still armed, still confident. He retreated to the cruiser called dispatch on the long-range channel, but the line hissed and fell silent again. The storm had damaged more than the roads. He checked his phone, no service. He was alone. That knowledge no longer brought fear, only focus. He opened the trunk and retrieved his flashlight, then moved back toward the mill. The snow muffled every step. When he reached the loading dock, he climbed the old wooden ladder to the upper catwalk, moving with deliberate care. From above, he could see them clearly now. 3 men, one watching the door, one cleaning a weapon, the third pacing near the heater. They looked tense, restless. He counted to 3 under his breath, then dropped down, weapon raised. Police hands. Where I can see them. The shout echoed through the hollow space like thunder. 2 of the men froze. The third lunged for his rifle. Jack fired once, the bullet striking the crate beside him, splintering wood. The man dropped his weapon and raised both hands. The others followed. Jack advanced, voice firm. Down faced the floor. They obeyed, one cursing under his breath, though Jack barely heard it through the rush of adrenaline. He cuffed the nearest man, then turned to the one who had been pacing. His sleeve had a ragged tear, the same tear he'd seen through the scope of his memory. Name Jack ordered. The man glared, but said nothing. You're under arrest for attempted murder of a federal officer and minor endangerment. You don't know what you're walking into. The man muttered finally. You think this is about the kid? Jack's grip tightened on the cuffs. Start talking. The man smirked, though fear flickered behind his eyes. You were the target, officer. The girl was just the noise to pull you out. The words hit harder than a blow. What did you say? We were paid to make it look like a kidnapping rescue. They wanted you exposed away from town. Who wanted that? The man hesitated, then glanced toward his partners. Doesn't matter now. You're already marked. Jack's voice grew colder. You'll tell me everything. He pulled the suspect to his feet, frisked him, and found a phone in his coat pocket. Old model screen cracked, but still working. What's on this? He asked. You'll see. The man said, his tone shifting from defiance to weary acceptance. Jack powered it on the battery low but holding. The screen opened to a file list labeled Turner Logs. He tapped the first one, and his own voice filled the air. Radio checks, location updates, casual exchanges from patrol shifts. His blood ran cold. Every conversation he'd ever had on duty, every mile he'd driven was recorded. How long have you had this? He demanded. Not me, the man said. We were sent it. Said it came straight from someone inside your department. They wanted us to know where to find you. Jack scrolled through the files, dozens of them all tagged with timestamps and coordinates. Who sent it? The man hesitated, then said quietly, Your captain. Jack froze. That's not possible. Name on the message was Cole. The man continued. Ray Cole, right? We don't ask questions about clients. We just take payment. Jack's heart pounded as he replayed the call from Dawn. The captain's voice, calm, deliberate, warning him to let go. Sometimes doing your job means knowing when not to dig deeper. Now the meaning twisted dark and clear. The captain wasn't protecting him. He was silencing him. Jack shoved the phone into his pocket, pulling the suspect toward the door. "You're coming with me." "You won't make it," the man said, his voice rising with genuine panic. "He'll know. You think you're clever, but they're already watching." Jack ignored him, marching him through the snow toward the cruiser. He shoved him inside, locked the back doors, and stepped away to make one last attempt at a signal. Static again, but faint through the noise came a single burst. "Unit 12, repeat. Do you copy?" He froze. The voice was familiar, but not from dispatch. It was Captain Cole. "Jack, if you can hear me, come back to town. I need to see you at once." The message cut off. Jack looked back at the man in the cruiser, his eyes wide and fearful. "See?" the man said through the window. "He knows." Jack turned toward the rising sun, its light sharp and cold as glass. "Good," he murmured. "Then it's time he sees me coming." He climbed into the driver's seat, the phone in his pocket, still playing faint echoes of his own patrol voice. The hunt had changed. It was no longer about survival. It was about truth. Gray light filtered through the clinic windows, turning the frost on the glass into faint rivers of silver. The storm had passed, but its silence still lingered like an echo that refused to fade. Jack Turner returned to the clinic just after dawn, his uniform streaked with snow and the shadow of a truth he could barely contain. Dr. Sarah Cole looked up from the examination table where she was checking Shadow's IV line. "You found them?" she asked. Jack nodded slowly. "One of them. He's in custody. Did he talk?" He met her gaze, tired and sharp. "Enough to know we've been betrayed." Sarah said nothing more, only tightened her grip on the clipboard. The air inside the small room felt heavier than the storm outside. Shadow stirred weakly on the table, his bandaged chest rising in shallow rhythm. Emma sat beside him, quiet, her eyes shadowed with worry and something older than fear. She looked up as Jack entered, her voice barely a whisper. "You caught them. Some of them," Jack said gently. "The rest won't get far." He pulled off his gloves and crouched beside her. "How's he doing?" "He moved his paw," she said, trying to smile. "Dr. Cole says that's good." "That's very good," Jack said, his voice softening. "He's stubborn. That's what keeps him alive." Emma hesitated, then asked, "Are we still in danger?" Jack wanted to say no. He wanted to promise her safety, but the word caught in his throat. "Not if I can help it," he said instead. Sarah glanced toward him. "You need to rest, both of you." But Jack didn't move to sit. He walked to the window, looking out at the empty road. "I arrested one of the gunmen at the old lumber mill," he said. "He told me something I wish wasn't true." He turned back, his voice tightening. "The ambush wasn't random. They weren't after you, Emma. They were after me." The girl's brow furrowed. "After you? Why?" "Because someone inside the department wanted me gone," he said quietly. "Someone who knew every route I take, every call I answer. They used you to lure me out there." The words hung in the air, cold and heavy. Emma's eyes flickered with confusion, then realization. She looked away, clutching Shadow's paw. Sarah frowned. "Jack, she's been through enough. Don't." "She needs to hear it," Jack said gently. "She deserves the truth." He knelt beside Emma again, his voice calm but firm. "When your stepfather called the police that night, what exactly did he say?" She swallowed hard. "He said I was missing. Did you hear him make the call?" "Yes," she whispered. "He was in the kitchen. I was hiding in the hallway. He told someone that the girl was gone, and then he laughed." Jack's pulse quickened. "He laughed?" She nodded. "He said, 'He'll come for her. He always does.' I didn't know who he meant, but he sounded like he was waiting for something. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes widening. "Emma," she said softly, "do you know who he was talking to?" The girl hesitated, then shook her head. "No, but I remember he called him Captain." The silence that followed was complete. Jack's jaw tightened. "Your stepfather works for Captain Cole," he said slowly. "Not as a cop, but as a courier. He used to run shipments for the department's evidence transport. That's how they move confiscated goods when cases close." "Goods?" Sarah asked. "Weapons. Cash. Drugs," Jack said grimly. "Anything that can disappear without paperwork if the wrong people are in charge." Emma's voice trembled. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted to get away from him. I found out about the boxes in the garage, the ones he said never to touch. One night I looked inside. There were envelopes full of money and papers with names on them, police names." Jack placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did nothing wrong, Emma. You were trying to protect yourself. But I made it worse," she said, tears welling. "When I ran away, he told the captain. They said they'd handle it. I thought they meant they'd find me and bring me home. I didn't know they meant to find you." Jack's heart sank. "You were the bait," he said quietly. "The call about your disappearance. It wasn't about saving you. It was about drawing me out to that ridge." Sarah's breath caught. "Jack, they set a trap using a child." "Yes," he said. "And they made it look like a rescue. Every word on that dispatch line came from inside the department." He rose slowly, anger tightening his movements. "They wanted it to look like a hero died trying to save a lost girl." Emma wiped her eyes, her small voice breaking. "I didn't know they wanted to hurt you. I swear." Jack knelt again, lifting her chin gently. "Emma, you didn't bring me into this. You helped me see it. If you hadn't been there, I'd still be blind." She stared at him, unsure. "You're not angry?" "Not with you," he said softly. "You saved my life." Sarah folded her arms, her expression grim. "If the captain's involved, you can't go back to headquarters. You'd be walking into a noose." Jack nodded. "I know. That's why I'm not going back." "Then what will you do?" He looked out the window again, the snow melting into fog across the horizon. "Find proof. Enough to make sure he can't bury this." Sarah exhaled. "You'll need help." "I'll take what I can get," Jack said, glancing toward Shadow. "When he's ready, we'll move." The dog stirred his tail, twitching faintly as if in answer. Emma smiled weakly through her tears. Jack placed a hand on the door handle, then paused, turning back to her. "Emma, no matter what happens next, you stay here with Sarah until I call. You've done more than enough." She nodded slowly. "Promise you'll come back, I'll try." He said the truth plain in his tone. "And I'll make sure no one ever uses you again." He stepped into the gray morning, the cold biting sharp and clean against his skin. The wind carried the faint cry of a raven over the valley. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had just begun. The snow had fallen again during the night, covering Silver Ridge in a clean white stillness that hid the scars of everything that came before. Jack Turner stood by the patrol vehicle parked outside the clinic, steam curling from the exhaust into the morning air. His breath formed the same ghostly trails as he spoke quietly to Dr. Sarah Cole. "You'll keep her here until I send word I will." Sarah said, her tone steady, though her eyes betrayed worry. "But Jack, you can't take him out there. He's barely healed." Jack looked down at Shadow, who stood beside him, posture strong, though one shoulder still carried the weight of the old wound. "Try telling him that," he said softly. The German shepherd looked up, amber eyes, alert tail giving a single determined wag as if to agree. Jack knelt, fastening the canine vest carefully around him. "We're not finished yet, partner." From behind them, Emma appeared at the doorway, wrapped in a blanket too large for her frame. "You're leaving again, aren't you?" she asked quietly. Jack nodded. "There's something I have to do." "Is it the captain?" "Yes," he said. "But I'm not going after him. He's coming after us." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" Jack straightened, glancing toward the highway where faint tire tracks cut through the snow. "He called last night. Said he's sending a transport team to escort me and Emma to the state office for protection. But he doesn't know she's still here." "You think it's a setup?" Sarah said. Jack nodded once. "The man I arrested is missing. He never made it to county lockup. Jensen's cleaning house, and I'm next on the list." He loaded a spare magazine into his sidearm and holstered it. "If they come, they'll come hard, and I'll be ready." Sarah placed a hand on his arm. "Jack, please don't face this alone." "I won't," he said, glancing at Shadow. "Not entirely." He gave her a small, grateful smile. "Keep her safe, Sarah." Then he stepped into the falling snow, Shadow following at his side, the two of them fading down the road like shapes cut from the cold. By late afternoon, the clouds had thickened again, turning the horizon the color of ash. Jack drove along the ridge road leading toward the old service route, the same road the captain had told him to take to meet the escort team. His fingers tightened on the wheel, the unease in his chest growing heavier with each mile. "You smell it too, don't you?" he murmured. Shadow sat upright in the back seat, nose twitching, body rigid. The German shepherd gave a low growl, one that rumbled like distant thunder. Jack slowed the car. The forest around them stood still, branches heavy with snow, the only sound the faint creak of ice shifting under its own weight. Up ahead, a black SUV idled at the bend in the road, its windows tinted, its engine silent. Jack pulled over 50 yards back, engine still running. "Something's off," he whispered. He reached for the radio, pressing the transmitter. "This is Officer Turner, Unit 12, requesting confirmation on transport static," answered him. Then, faintly, a voice came through. "Jack, it's Jensen. Proceed to the vehicle. They're expecting you." His captain's voice was smooth, calm, reassuring. Too calm. Jack's pulse slowed. "Copy that," he said, his tone steady, though his heart thundered beneath his vest. He looked at Shadow through the rearview mirror, the dog's ears pricked forward, gaze fixed on the SUV. "Stay sharp," Jack said softly. He stepped out of the cruiser, snow crunching beneath his boots. "State transport," he called out. No answer. The driver's door opened and a man in tactical black stepped out, his badge flashing under the weak sunlight. "Officer Turner." "That's right," Jack said. The man gestured toward the SUV. "We've been ordered to take you and the girl to the city. Captain's waiting at HQ." Jack took a step forward but stopped halfway. "Where's your unit patch?" The man hesitated. "Transferred division," he said quickly. "Temporary assignment." Jack nodded slowly, pretending to accept it. Then, from behind the SUV came a faint metallic click, one that only experience could recognize. A rifle being chambered. Shadow moved first. The German shepherd exploded from the cruiser like a streak of black and gold snow spraying in every direction. He charged toward the tree line to the right of the SUV, barking furiously. Jack dropped to one knee behind his open door, drawing his weapon. A shadow moved among the pines, then the muzzle flash. A single shot cracked the silence. But it wasn't aimed at Jack. It was aimed where Shadow had been seconds earlier. The dog had already leapt, colliding with the shooter, knocking him flat into the snow. The rifle fired again, the bullet tearing harmlessly into the sky. Jack sprinted forward, taking cover behind the SUV gun trained on the second man. "Drop it," he commanded. The fake officer froze, hand half raised toward his weapon. Jack fired once, hitting the man's shoulder. He fell backward into the snow, groaning. Jack rushed to the tree line where Shadow had pinned the shooter teeth buried in the man's sleeve. The attacker struggled, his gloved hand reaching for a knife, but Shadow twisted, pulling him off balance. Jack kicked the weapon away, shouting, "Out!" Shadow released, stepping back, chest heaving but eyes fierce. Jack yanked the man's hood down. Beneath it was a face he recognized: Officer Dean Keller, one of Jensen's longtime deputies. "Dean," Jack said quietly, disbelief mixing with anger. "You were part of this." Keller coughed, blood staining the snow. "You were never supposed to make it past the ridge," he muttered. He said, "Clean and quick." He who Jack demanded, though he already knew. Keller's eyes flickered toward the road. "Jensen. Said you were turning. Couldn't risk exposure." Jack exhaled sharply, lowering his weapon. The truth he'd suspected now stood before him, bleeding and undeniable. He looked at Shadow, who sat alert beside him, fur streaked with snow but unbroken in spirit. "You did good, partner," he whispered. The dog gave a low, tired bark in response. As Jack cuffed the wounded men and radioed for backup, the horizon began to brighten faintly through the thickening snow. The storm would come again, but not tonight. The trap had been set for him, yet once more it was loyalty, not luck, that turned the tide. When the last echo of sirens reached the valley, Jack rested a hand on Shadow's neck and whispered, "You saved us again." The dog leaned gently against him, the bond between them forged now not just in duty, but in faith, the kind that survives betrayal and still chooses to protect. Spring came slowly to Silver Ridge, as if the earth itself hesitated to believe the storm was truly gone. The snow had melted into rivulets that shimmered along the gutters, and for the first time in months, sunlight touched the rooftops without fear of being chased away. Jack Turner stood on the courthouse steps, his uniform pressed but simple, the color faded from wear. He watched as the flags on Main Street swayed in the morning breeze. The trial had ended only a week before. Captain Roy Jensen had been led away in handcuffs, his once calm voice replaced by silence. The FBI had taken over the case after Jack surrendered every file, every report, and finally the one thing that sealed the verdict: the dashcam recordings from his own patrol car, the same car that had carried him and Shadow through the storm that night. The footage showed everything: the false dispatch orders, the ambush site coordinates, the unauthorized radio transmissions tied to Jensen's ID. Truth had always been there, buried in routine, hidden behind procedure, waiting for light. Jack still couldn't decide if the exposure felt like victory or loss. He adjusted the medal pinned to his chest, not for heroism, but for integrity. It felt heavier than he expected. A crowd was gathering across the street in front of the memorial square. Folding chairs had been arranged in rows, a banner fluttering above the stage K9 Valor Ceremony in honor of Rex Shadow Turner. The name still caught in Jack's throat. The dog had survived the final ambush, but never fully recovered from his injuries. He passed peacefully 2 weeks later at the clinic, his head resting against Jack's arm. Even now, the memory clung to him, the soft rise of Shadow's final breath, the gentle weight that left the world a little quieter. Jack crossed the street slowly, his boots scuffing against the bricks. Emma, now with her hair braided neatly and dressed in a pale blue coat, stood beside Dr. Sarah Cole near the stage. She turned when she saw him and smiled, the kind that carried both warmth and the ache of everything they'd endured. "You're late," she teased softly. "Traffic," he said, though they both knew there hadn't been a car on that road all morning. She looked up at the banner, eyes bright. He'd hate all this attention. He'd pretend to, Jack replied. Then wag his tail anyway. The ceremony began with quiet dignity. The town's mayor spoke first, then an FBI agent who summarized the investigation's outcome. Words like accountability and honor filled the air, but Jack barely heard them. His attention drifted to the empty leash coiled neatly on the podium, the brass tag engraved with Shadow's badge number. When they called his name, he stepped forward, every movement measured. The applause rose gently, not loud, but full of respect. He accepted the folded flag, the medal, and a small wooden plaque carved with Shadow's likeness. The weight of them felt less like pride and more like remembrance. When the speeches ended, Emma stepped up to the microphone. Her voice was soft at first, but clear. "I was saved twice," she said. "Once from people who meant harm, and once from my own silence. Officer Turner and Rex didn't just protect me, they taught me what loyalty means." She glanced at Jack, her small hands trembling only slightly. "That's why today, with Dr. Cole's help, we're opening something new. A place for service dogs to heal, to train, and to teach others the same courage Rex showed." She gestured toward the banner draped over a nearby table. When the wind lifted it, the words gleamed in gold: Rex's Promise Canine Training and Rehabilitation Center. For a long moment no one spoke. Then the crowd began to applaud slowly at first, then rising in waves until the square filled with sound. Jack felt something loosen inside him, something that had been locked tight since that night on the mountain road. He looked down at Emma, pride softening his voice. "He'd be proud of you." "We both would," Sarah added, stepping beside him. "You gave them hope, Jack. All of them." He shook his head gently. "He did. I just followed his lead." As the ceremony ended, sunlight broke through the clouds, scattering over the town like shards of gold. Jack walked to the memorial stone where Shadow's collar hung beneath a bronze plaque. He rested his hand against the cold metal. "You kept your promise," he murmured. Behind him, laughter drifted from the crowd as children ran across the grass, their footsteps echoing the rhythm of new beginnings. Emma joined him, placing a single daffodil on the plaque. "Spring's his favorite," she said. "He used to chase bees in the garden, didn't he?" Jack smiled faintly. "Every time I mowed the lawn." They stood in silence, watching as the petals quivered in the wind. Later that afternoon, the new center opened its doors. The first recruits, 3 young German shepherds and a Labrador, padded nervously across the training yard. Jack stood at the fence with Emma and Sarah, the mountains behind them glowing under the last light of day. "You think they'll live up to him?" Emma asked. Jack watched the dogs tumbling playfully in the grass. "They already do," he said. "Every time they learn. Every time they trust. That's his legacy." As evening settled, the air turned soft and warm. Jack took one last look at the horizon. The sun was setting behind the ridge where it had all begun, painting the sky in amber and gold. He could almost see a dark shape running across that light, strong, fearless eternal. He smiled, whispering the words that had carried him through every storm. "Good work, partner. You can rest now." If this story kept you on the edge, if you felt the storm, the silence, and the loyalty that refused to die, don't leave without showing it. Hit that like button, subscribe for more true stories of courage and redemption, and tell me in the comments which moment stayed with you the most. Was it the ambush in the snow, the betrayal inside the badge, or the bond that outlived the bullets? And where are you watching from tonight? Let's see how far the story of Silver Ridge has traveled.